Hello, welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name is Guthrie, obviously Rusty. I'm here with Susan. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Guthrie.
And we had, there were tech troubles trying to get in here, and
We did have a few tech issues.
yeah. So hopefully everything goes smoothly. But sometimes it's just one of those days. So we had. Did we get any errors?
Oh, that's funny.
Right?
Did we get any errors while we were trying to get this set up today?
That is our topic for today.
That's our topic today is errors.
But not. I mean, we make the behavioral science assumption that humans make errors. I don't want to talk about behavioral science today. I would like to talk about UX,
user experience,
and how to design for human error.
Yeah.
Is there anything? I guess off the top, we're going to be starting up some new socials. So, I don't know. Check that out. Probably, maybe not this podcast, but maybe the next one. I'm looking to get a Blue Sky account going. Have a new Instagram page. Our LinkedIn will remain the same. Facebook will remain the same. So just to kind of keep things rolling,
changing it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, do you want to start by defining what
an error
is?
That's a good question. I don't know that I was planning on defining it, but I guess I can. I mean, an error in terms of user experience is when something something happens that the user did not anticipate, and it requires the person to do something differently in order to continue. That's off the top of my head. So I guess I'm not talking about, maybe I should, there's errors that occur that the system, the technology has, that has nothing to do with the human. And maybe we want to include that because you do need to communicate that. But mainly I'm talking about the person is trying to do something with the tool and it's not working. And there's a mismatch between what the tool is expecting to happen and what the human is doing. And the human can't keep going until they fix the mistake or the error or the problem. That's what
I think that's a good definition.
About as an error.
That's a good definition.
But I usually have a pretty broad definition. It's just when it's not working. That's my definition. It's not working the way it's supposed to, or the way that person thinks it's supposed to
or
work.
the way you want it to work. Yeah. Okay, so
you want me to keep talking, or do you have more questions?
I guess I have another question.
I don't hear you.
You don't hear me?
We have an error. Okay, try again.
Hello?
No. I cannot believe it, but I don't hear you. Okay. I can try just
do you hear me
talking while you're
test
trying to figure out what's going on. I don't think it's me. Someone could think we did this on purpose to try and simulate an error while we're doing our casting. I mean, you were fine a moment ago.
Yeah. Did you touch anything? Did you press anything?
I am on the correct. I don't think it's me, but I'm telling you what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch my output and see
Yeah.
If by any chance switching my output makes a difference.
Test, test,
There
test,
he is.
test, test, test.
Are you still talking?
Test, 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 test. Yeah,
Yeah.
I am, and it says it's coming into Restream, so I think it's actually
Okay.
definitely you.
Well, now I can hear you.
Great.
So it was me.
It was you.
So that's an example of trying to troubleshoot errors. You know, the whole error thing is really interesting. I find it really interesting.
We're gonna leave that in.
What?
We're gonna leave that in.
Yeah, because it was an error.
And let's analyze it.
Okay.
Right. So one of the things that I experienced when the error happened,
Yeah.
was fear, shock,
Mm-hmm.
surprise,
Mm-hmm.
uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
doubt, and that's the first. Here's one more thing to consider as we go. The thing about errors is, I think there are multiple types, because some errors we know that it's us. But I think a lot of times when we're using an interface and there's an error, we don't know where in the chain the error is. I'll give you a perfect example. I tried to sign up for there's a contest that happens where they give you like 50 world events. Will in the next year, crypto hit 100 and whatever? Will the economy, will there be a recession by the end? That kind of stuff. And it's mostly kind of political stuff. And so what you do is you put in all your guesses, like, okay, this is what I think the probability is. And then whoever does the best job, not necessarily calling each event, but having sort of like the, for example, if 98% of people think that, we'll just stick with that Bitcoin hits, 120,000 or whatever, and 2% don't, and it doesn't, right? And you're in the 2%, that's worth more.
I see. Then,
right. So
right.
it's not just your
It's
score, it's
weighted.
relative. Yeah, it's relative to everyone else. So I was using it and I did one. I was like, oh, this is fun. I want to do the other one. And I got an error screen. And it was a timeout. Like the page wouldn't load, right? And then it was like, we can't get to your whatever, right?
Yeah.
And in that moment, was their server down? Was my internet down? Did my browser crash? Did I do something wrong? Should I have not hit reload? Like it could have been any of these things. And because I didn't have a error message that told me what was wrong, I didn't know. And I tried like 30 seconds later, I went back to the site and it didn't seem to work. And so I just exited.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah. I mean, what you're saying is interesting because, well, first of all, you said when we couldn't get, when I said I don't hear you, Guthrie, right? You went through all these initial reactions, which were actually, I mean, you said you didn't want to talk about the behavioral science part of it. Sorry, where it's creeping in.
I know.
You had an emotional reaction, right? And so I think when people are designing user experiences, sometimes they don't take that emotional reaction into account. It's very, you're if someone is even trying to anticipate errors, which does not happen often enough, but let's say they probably don't, or they may not take into account the emotional aspect of it, the stress aspect of it. When we're under stress, we react differently, and our focus narrows, and we're not necessarily thinking clearly. And so it's the thing is, people are going to make mistakes. There are going to be errors. And yet I think in design, in UX design and in product design, it gets many times, there's some exceptions I'll get into, it gets the least amount of time and attention, right? So here's something that, 99% sure that there is going to be an error, a mistake made while people are using the product. It's going to happen at some point. And yet, what percentage of the time and energy during design is allocated to that? Like, so small.
Now, one of the potential pitfalls, and I'll have to ask you this, is I think when most people think of errors when it comes to technology, it's like a technical error. A server's down, the cloud isn't working,
Yeah, and there's
the
definitely those
memory
kinds of errors, right?
overflow. And well, as a designer, one, I don't know what those could be, right? I'm designing the screen. I don't
Right,
know what
right. I don't know what's going to
the
happen if the
back end
server goes
is.
down while they're doing this.
Who knows how that'll manifest.
Right.
So not only do I not understand what errors might be out there, that's one. Two, I don't know, I wouldn't know how to explain it, or
Well,
what do you do about it, right?
okay.
There's
Well,
nothing I can do.
okay. I understand that, but that doesn't mean you just throw your hands up and say, "Okay, I'm going to ignore the entire
Well, so
possibility
are
that there's
there
going to be an
errors
error."
that are not sort of like
Yeah,
back
yeah. So
end
first of all,
server
those
hardware
kinds of
errors?
error. Okay, so let's talk about first the technical errors that occur that don't necessarily have to do with what the user was doing or the interaction of the user with the product. We'll talk about those first, then we'll go talk about the other kind. So, yeah, as you said, stuff's going to happen. The internet's going to go down, the server's going to go down, or something like that. As a designer, as the UX person, you don't know what's going to happen and you don't know the cause, but you can assume it's going to happen. And so, depending on the frequency and criticality of the task that someone might be doing, it's a good idea to somewhere along the line ask, "Hey guys, what happens if the server goes down while the user is doing this thing? They're inputting all of this information, or they're I don't know, they're whatever they're doing. How serious is it going to be if something technical happens? Like, how bad is that?" And for instance, let's say someone's entering a bunch of data and the internet goes down. There something, will what they entered so far be saved or not? You can know that. You can know that. You can ask the programming team, what's the answer to that question? Are there saves going on in the background? Is the data cached anywhere? I mean, just ask and find out, especially for really important tasks or tasks that are very time consuming. You've got to know. And once you know that, okay, then you can figure out what your strategy. If they say to you, no, nothing will be saved, right? That means you've got to communicate to the user that they have to periodically save, because if anything goes wrong, all the data will be lost. You've got to tell them that. You can't just not mention it and they find out after it
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
so you've got
that's
to
interesting.
so the minimum you can do is decide which are the tasks that people are doing that are really important and really time consuming, and if something goes wrong, it's just going to be kind of a mess. And then go to your technical team, your programmers, and say, what happens if something happens? What's going to happen? What's the result? So that you, as a UX person, can figure out what to do. And the thing is that, as I said, often doesn't happen. In fact, Guthrie, you and I, we've been involved in a couple of projects where there's this big discussion about strings, right? And because that's what this is referred to in
Strings, for those who may not know, is a technical term of art developed by the by the engineering team. There are different types of data that can be stored. Some could be an integer. You could have a floating point operation, which is just something with a decimal place. And you can also have a thing that's called a string. It is a string of probably ASCII characters. Could be
alphanumeric
anything,
characters or something.
right?
Yeah.
So, for example, you could have 14 that could be saved as a string. It's more resource efficient to save it as an integer, right? So a lot of,
A
you know,
number,
yeah. So what kind
but
of
it might
variable
not
you
be.
create?
It might.
But yeah. So a string is anything, and whenever you are displaying text on a page, um, I, I for those who may not have this technical background, and I certainly barely do, but it's not just stuff that's on a page. That's actually a variable that
It's
so the variable, instead of
stored
it
as
being
its own
14,
entity.
is, you know welcome to the team W. We're a behavioral science consulting company that specializes in user experience and UX management, right? So like that whole thing is a variable as a string, and then when the server displays the website, it pulls that
Pulls up
variable.
this string.
So
And
if you so
mhm,
that's so the UX writing, the text that's there in many applications, not all, but many, it's actually stored as a variable that the tech team is
someplace.
calling. And so whether that variable says, "Hi, welcome to the team Derberber," with like a typo, or like the team W, "We're
Or
really
whether
bad
it
at what we
says,
do," it'll pull it.
right, whatever it says. And and messages having to do with instructions and errors, and oh, this you must enter all numbers into this field. All those things, those are
Mhm.
strings, and they're all stored somewhere. And there are people in organizations and departments whose job it is to manage the strings.
Did you ever watch The Matrix?
Of course.
So in the first Matrix, there's the scene where the green letters are floating down,
Yes.
and the guy says, "I don't even see it anymore." It's like, that's a redhead, that's a blonde, that's a building,
Yeah.
right? It's like you just kind of
Right.
you read the code. Um, th- there is that's sort of what the strings are, and that's why you need to check, because to the programmer, they don't see the strings. It's just variable. It's just company description 1,
Right. Right.
company product
Error
listing 2.
message 2017, blah 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 blah. Right. So a big so this is
Right.
this
So
is
if no one's checking what the string is, it's pulling the variable,
so
and it's going to
this
always pull
is
the variable.
this is a problem. This is a problem on so many levels. Okay. So first of all, uh yeah, no one, what string has been pulled? Second of all, who wrote these strings? Third, probably the biggest problem from a UX point of view is context. You're pulling in some message from somewhere. Does that even make sense in the context of what just happened? You know? So, um, and Guthrie, we've been through this. Try and find out where the strings are stored and what they are and who controls them. It's like a it's like a mystery
Or
in
how to
these,
change them,
or how to change them.
right?
It's
So
like
the string
people
is in a
just don't know. And so there's this tendency when you're working with a team and you go, wow, that for instance, you're doing an evaluation of a product to see what the UX issues
Mhm,
are,
mhm.
and you purposely make a couple of errors or mistakes as the user. Not even complicated, just no. Oh yeah, probably. Sometimes people might not enter that right, and to see what comes up, and then it comes up and you go, wow, that doesn't make any sense. So you go to someone and you say, I think we need to change this, and they just like look at you blankly. The other thing I find really fun is, and this happens to UX writers or even just UX people on a team, they get asked, would you evaluate the strings? But it's out of context. Like It's like, would you approve? It's actually approve, not evaluate, approve the strings. They
Well, it's on
wanted,
their checklist, right? So you have to
yes,
make
it's
sure that
on their
someone looks at
checklist, get the
someone
strings
cared about
approved.
it.
And so you just get these strings and they're not in any context. And you're supposed to say, yes, that's okay. I mean, I guess you're looking for typos, so you can be a proofreader, but you don't know.
Okay, here's an example of a string, right? Select continue to move to the next screen, right? So that's a string that could
Might be
exist,
okay,
but like, what if the
but you
button
don't
says
know.
submit? What
Right.
if there is no button?
Or what if I didn't know I needed to go to a next screen, or why do I, I mean, there's so many things. And so really the
So if
whole
you're yes, if you
system.
so when you evaluate this, so again, in some ways this is fun because it
This
is a
is not
problem
fun.
of technology. So the strings are just data that's stored as characters,
Yeah.
and that's the whole point. That's the whole point because that's how the technology framework works, is that what we see as a graphical user interface is a facade. That doesn't exist.
Right.
It's like a stage production.
Right. We tend to think there's these screens
Means
and they're stored
it's just code.
and the whole screen comes up
It's like a
and
physical
it's not.
well, we it's skeuomorphism, right? Skeuomorphism, whatever.
Yeah.
We see it as a physical object, so we treat it with
Treat it as one.
as a physical object with physical object properties. But that's not how it works. You could have an entire screen that's literally just like HTML.JavaScript,
Right.
like linked to a JavaScript file, and
Right.
it's all in there, right? So it doesn't. It's just not how it
But
works.
okay.
Well,
All right.
hold on. But that means that the string exists as like the fundamental aspect of the string is that it does exist without context. And the
Yes.
only and because and then you put all the variables together and you have the page. So like where the strings are stored, the system for storing that stuff is designed to store it without context, because you can't store it with context. That would
I
be
know.
very resource intensive.
I know. I
So how
understand that.
can you see it in context
I,
when everything is stored
you
just
know, I
as characters? It's tough.
okay. This is one of those
This is
fundamental.
why it's a
What?
problem. This is why it's a problem.
That's why it's a problem. And the thing is, it is like this. Did it have to be like this? I don't know. I'm not going to go into that. But it is like this, and
Dreamweaver.
it is, like I said, it is complicated, and it's baked into the whole technology, and so no one wants to do anything about it. And so it's very hard. It's very hard, but it's but it's critical. It
So
can be critical.
let's talk about Dreamweaver. So Macromedia
That was a
Dreamweaver,
long time ago.
which is a long time ago, Adobe said, "Hey, writing websites in code is stupid." Someone did. I don't know if they were the first ones to do it. Let's instead have a production environment where, as you change the code, it shows you in real time what is on the page. And on the flip side, instead of having to change the code and see what it spits out, you can change the page and it'll change the code. It's a cool concept. And so it's this idea of, instead of designing from a code base to create a screen, you design from a screen and it creates the code base. And I mean, obviously the people at Figma have been trying to do this for forever, because if you can do that, right, you take the power away from the engineering side. I actually so it was, when was Dreamweaver at its apex? Like
Ooh,
2004,
yeah, yeah,
2002,
yeah.
you know? The problem is that it turns out that writing code um, is a little bit of an art and kind of a little bit of a science. And because, if you say create a button, it would do it, and you could like drag the button around, right? But what it was doing on the back end was making a ton of garbledy code fragments.
Yeah.
And then what would happen is that you would get all these bugs and all these errors because the back end was a total mess.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, the button's in the right place, but you've accidentally made like 10,000 table
Right.
rows that
Right.
you're trying to, like it's just trying to figure it out. So it died. People are like, this is not the best way to do it, and we've sort of moved on.
Yeah.
And then, but there have been other services that have spawned sort of in its wake. So that's the Squarespace, the Wix,
Yeah.
the WordPress, which is, hey, just have a website. Now, the way that they did it was it's all locked down, right? You get a theme that you
Right.
can't edit.
You got guardrails. You can
You got
only
guardrails, right? Like,
you're
here's a
in the
paragraph.
playpen.
You
Yeah.
can change a paragraph. You want to add an image? Okay, you can
No,
add an
that
image, right? But
but
you're not moving stuff around. You're not
right.
right. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So they kind of locked it down. And honestly, I think that's been a huge success because there's all kinds of people who couldn't make a website that can make now a decent website that's quasi responsive and quasi secure
But
and
but that is not what's going on with, what, 95%
99%.
of
Yeah.
apps and
Bigger
software.
companies that would have a UX team.
Yeah.
But here's where things get interesting. And I don't want to talk about it. I just want to bring up the point and then we can move on.
Okay, what?
Because we now have, who develops AI? It's a bunch of programmers. And so one of the things that they really focus on is making AI models that can code.
Right?
So, hey, can you? I need a search function
Yeah.
that returns, the highest
Right.
number in this whatever. Can you write it for me, right? And then the AI will write it in, Python or whatever script you need to
Yeah.
be written in. There is a potential future where because if the AI models get good enough at coding on the back end, coding in whatever development stack that the company uses, coding using that company's specific best practices. You could have a world. We could get back to this where you have uh, a live environment. That here's the website, and when you add a page or something, it would change it on the back end, which is a little scary, right? For security reasons and for bug reasons and all that stuff. But if it was able to do it maybe with some guardrails, maybe with some AI coding help, we could get back to that where the people where do the strings live? They would actually live in the UX house because the AI is smart enough to be able to change it in the whatever database, stuff where it lives. You don't have to change it there. We could change it in a graphical user interface setting, and then the AI would be able to change it correctly. So right now we're
Uh,
sort of in this tech limbo,
yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
been
I
it's been
mean,
20 years of
I
people seeing this vision of don't change it in the tech side, change it on the user
so
side.
it is a little silly perhaps that we decided to talk about this topic, since I think this is a topic that is unlikely to be solved and nobody cares. So why did we pick it? but I think
Okay, well then, so then,
I have more to say about even with that statement. But
okay,
yes.
you run with it then.
Well, I guess I think we get that complacent's the wrong word. I think we get just we just get used to stuff, and I wish we wouldn't, and maybe sometime in the future we don't have to. Just get used to the stuff that things are. Just get used to the idea that things are going to go wrong, and that it's going to take a few minutes to figure out why your microphone doesn't work, or I'm not going to be able to enter the data right, or and so on. And I'm hoping that maybe at some point in the future we don't have to do that. It introduces, friction. It's annoying. And it's interesting to me what we accept. I mean, imagine if you were writing a book, Guthrie, and you're in your word processing program, Microsoft Word, and you're typing away. And, 20% of the time you type it and it types the wrong letters. I mean, and you know how to fix it. It's like, I don't know why I did that. And you got to back up and fix it. But it's annoying. And you'd be like, why is it making so many errors? So I, I think I wish we would deal with it. I guess we're not going to deal with it. But there are some instances where you have to deal with it. And there's some places where errors are very costly, maybe even life and death costly, right? I've worked on projects where an error literally could be the difference between life and death, someone dying on the operating table. And it's, in those instances, you can usually get people to pay attention. Although it's, really the history of errors in user experience. I think someone wrote a book on this. The history is that it is still largely ignored unless and until there is a huge either monetary disaster or someone dies disaster. Nuclear power plant controls problem, or I mean, I was involved in a case years ago where because of an error and an error in messaging on the screen and so on, an insurance company lost $7 million just from one interaction that had to do with the sale of a commercial real estate property. And suddenly they got very interested in error messages, and we were able to go in and do some fixing. But I wish you didn't have to wait till there was a big disaster to try and, fix error messages. There's another thing that I wanted to say. There's some interesting research that shows that, because sometimes I'll be working with a client and they'll go, this is very important. This interaction that the user's having, this is very important to us. This is like going to result in sales or not sales of millions of dollars if we get this wrong. And then they'll say, we want to eliminate all errors. And it's like, well, that's probably not going to happen. And if you want to get close to it, the estimate is that you will have to take twice as long in the development of that product, twice the time to design, and twice the time to train people to use it.
And so the answer is, well, why don't we do it in half the time, and then we'll just develop a new version, and we'll have two versions. That would be the time to take one version.
Wait a minute. Why would you have two versions? Well, how does that help you?
The new tech, the new whatever. You know how
yeah.
these development cycles are, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like why? Like if we spend 3 years to develop a product, our competitor comes out with a new version every year and a half.
Yeah.
We will be behind.
Right. Except what happens. You don't address the you
Well, that's
never
part of
go
the
back
problem
and
with the
fix
errors,
things.
right? Errors are literally context dependent. That's the whole thing, right? Here's the context of what's happening. Here's what went wrong.
Yeah.
Here's how you fix it. And
Yeah.
so
And
every time that you do a new redesign or change the hardware on the back end, all the errors are going to change. And what you do to fix the errors is going to change.
Right.
And so it's, that's why no one ever does it, because it's like, well, yeah, we could spend a bunch of time working on fixing all the errors, or let's just spend that time working on the new version that will replace the old version.
I know, but I cannot tell you how many times I've had people say, here, hey, look, if we need to change the wording of this error message because it's actually not accurate anymore. And it's like, okay, yeah, we'll catch it before release or catch it before the next release.
We'll do it the next.
It's never on anybody's backlog. Have you ever seen a backlog that said fix these strings? I mean, I don't know that they'd even get on the
They
backlog.
love fixing technical errors. There's always like a graph of like number of errors per user,
I know,
and
I
it goes
know.
down.
Well, okay, but can we get really practical though and say if you had the opportunity to fix
Sure.
an error message or create a good error message,
That's
what should that be?
that's where I wanted to start, and then we had that microphone glitch, and it just threw us all off. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely do's and don'ts about error messages,
all right, I'll let you go.
to
Go for it.
follow. And again, I'll say with the caveat that it really depends on the context. So it's hard to say that, here's guidelines that will always work. But in general, um, you want to tell, assuming we're talking about the user does something and whatever they did, it is not going to work. Like they they put in all numbers and they were supposed to put in letters or whatever it is. Um, the first thing there's the message that you show them should contain the following parts. It should say what happened, right? What happened? Uh, you entered all number. It should say what happened that's causing the error. It should say uh, what they can do about it, right? Those are like the two most important things: what happened and what they can do to fix it. Um, you, I know, I don't, I know. I guess maybe. Do I agree with this? It says error code 47395, right? I guess that can be useful if you can't resolve the problem and you're trying to talk to tech support and say, and here's the error code, because that's the code. That's some kind of error code. But basically, that's useless to the human unless they're talking to a support person, and hopefully they don't have to talk to a support person. You should avoid, uh, you should absolutely avoid being funny or what you think is funny or humorous because depending on the situation, the human doesn't find this humorous at all. So being cute and humorous, not a good idea.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Imagine a version where an AI chatbot comes up and is like, "Hey, we noticed you did this or this." So, is it better to have a short but correct message, like you put in dashes? We This form doesn't, you put in spaces instead of dashes. Like just like a single sentence that's the various thing, or is it better to have sort of like a like, "Hi, I'm the chatbot. I've noticed that you've done this. Do you need any help to do X or Y?"
No, but it's better to be as concise and short as possible. You want to avoid saying things like I'm looking at. I brought up some of my favorite error messages on the screen here. Uh, uh, it says problem signing the chunk exclamation mark. I, what does that mean? Who knows, right? You don't want to say that. Um, uh, or even things like size of a request header field exceeds server limit. Not
I mean,
not
that
you
makes sense to someone.
to someone, but if you're just filling out a form to order a pizza, that probably doesn't make sense. Um, the ones, then there's the, enter your phone number, right? Phone where you can be contacted, and you put in your phone number, and then it comes back and it says, please enter the phone number in the following format, and it has the dashes.
Yeah, this
So,
this one, I mean, I can envision how it happens, but yeah, because the because like from a coding perspective, it's so easy just to take the string and then modify the string
and
to
put in the dashes.
put in the dashes for you.
Or if you can't do that, can you show them can you when it says phone where you can be contacted and then in parentheses xxx dash right show them the format you want. If you put it in the field or at least put it in the instruction rather than waiting till someone makes an error. So the other kind of general guideline is, the best error message is no error message. The best error message is you do everything you can to prevent misunderstanding and prevent an error, including changing the label of your fields, so that it's giving a hint about what you want to do. If you have really critical interactions and someone's about to uh, delete a whole bunch of stuff, right? This is when we know it's important to have a confirmation message. Are you sure that you want to do this? Now, you have to, all of these things, you got to watch out for wording. Have you ever had a message, Guthrie, where it's like, are you sure that you want to? I like this one I have on my screen. Are you sure you want to cancel the order and receive a refund? And the buttons are cancel and continue. So if I cancel, am I canceling the order or am I closing this window or what? If I'm continuing, does that continue the cancel or does that continue the order? Right? It's like, which is it? And again, these are the things, it's because all the stuff is being saved somewhere out of context. But these are important things. So how do you avoid this kind of stuff from happening? You need to go through, I think, as a UX person, and you need to identify especially, the moments that matter, right? These really important moments during the use of this product or this task in the product. And find, and experiment and find out what are the errors that people are likely to make at this point. Or maybe not even likely, but might be made at this point. Because, and then what happens and what comes up, and evaluate the strings and evaluate the screens. And so that you can determine, oh yeah, if that happens, that's annoying, but they can get through it. I'd still want to fix it, but that one is of low importance. This problem is of medium importance, and this problem is huge. We we got to fix this whole error situation on this one. That's what I think. That's the minimum that the UX person needs to be doing. That's my thought about it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you got to do is you got to do user testing, because even if you're the UX person looking out for errors, that product way too well, and you are not the user, and you got to see what happens when you got to see what happens when the nurse is in the clinic and trying to get the readout from the pacemaker and there's an error, because you, as not being a nurse and not being in the clinic, you can't evaluate that on your own. That's going to require testing with that target audience to find out what are the errors that you want to anticipate and deal with before they happen. Right?
I think that's all very good advice.
And no one's going to do it.
Yeah, it's really sad. Well, it's just, it takes a lot of time and effort, and that's if you can implement it, right? So it's sort of split.
Well, the other thing that you can do that I have done is I have done an ROI, return on investment calculation. It's like, okay, we have this product. Here's some likely errors that are going to happen. Here's going to be, so if those errors occur, what's the cost? What's the cost of having that error possibility in there? And I've done it where we actually calculated it out. It's like, okay, over the course of 6 months, and you have this many users, and you have this many errors occurring, X percent, and and the cost is interesting because from a user experience point of view, we tend to look at it as the cost of uh, annoyance, unhappiness, abandoned shopping carts uh, to the user, right? Or the data gets entered wrong and they have to redo it. And so that's the user is bearing the brunt of that. But there are costs to the organization as well that could happen. I mean, so if data is entered incorrectly and the incorrect data is in the system, what's the cost of that? Not to the user, but to the organization, to the company. There might, in some cases, there might be none, but sometimes that might be quite costly because now we actually don't have the right information in, or we're shipping the wrong item. And then we're going to have to deal with that and process a return. And there are, that's real costs, right? Or whatever the cost is. So I don't assume that the only cost is user annoyance and user wasting of time, or even the user, deciding not to use your product anymore. There's other costs, and think about those, and then target those errors and those products with those errors that have that cost. And like I said, even try calculating an ROI, and and um, and then you can because what you can do is you can say, here's how much we're going to lose, here's how much money we're going to lose in a year if we don't fix this error, here's how much money it's going to take to fix the error. Is it worth it or not? Right? Might not be, might be. And just be pragmatic about it, but make your case. I don't like this thing of, well, it's hard to fix. Other things. Oh, a few other things about error messages, because I just love error messages. Be brief, as brief as you can, but without sacrificing clarity. Do not say please. Do not say thank you. This is not, please re-enter the phone. No, the less words, the better. I have that conversation all the time with clients. I must be one of the weird people in the world that likes to review strings, right? Nobody likes to do that.
Just depends. That's the other thing is that it's like all right, hey, we need to do string review. Well, we have 10,000 strings in our database.
Yep.
Get started.
It's going. I would be like, okay. You also have, because it is strings and we're talking about words, we have possible issues of translation, right? Because that's the other thing that happens is these strings just get automatically translated into other languages. And sometimes that doesn't go particularly well or particularly smoothly. So, all those fun things. I guess I wish, Guthrie, that we would fix the underlying technology behind it also.
No, I mean that is definitely the answer.
It's
And
not going to happen. It must be
it is gonna happen.
I don't know.
Figma is not gonna stop until they take over everyone's development budget. Like,
Oh, that's not true.
I don't know if they'll succeed, but they won't stop until they do. Right? Like the whole point of Adobe trying and failing to buy Figma was to muscle
to,
development
to
budgets
yeah.
out, because the development budget is huge, right? And the UX budget's teensy tiny. So why mess around with that if you can have Figma, have the designers create the prototype? That prototype is proto code. Have the work with something, have the developers kind of working in, if you can get the developers working in Figma too, dot dot dot, and then that ports to somewhere. So the potential is there. the potential is there. I don't know if companies are doing it. I don't know if it works, but there are definitely people who want that to happen. I mean, one thing I will say is, for our website, we use Bootstrap, which is just an open source CSS framework, amongst other things, SAS, to um, chunkify things on a website in an easy way. But it's easy to do when there's no fancy backend. And that's always the problem, is the security and the cloud and the fancy backend. And if you're if you're using stuff that's not in the develop, like if you're using stuff that the user, when a user visits a website, what the user is seeing is usually the tip of the iceberg, and most of the stuff is happening in the background.
Mm.
And double that if you have anything AI based.
Yeah.
So so if it's happening not on the user's thing, then it's pulling from somewhere, and so
Yeah.
then it lives somewhere else. And if it lives somewhere else, then no one can ever find it, and they never do. And all the error messages are weird. So this is, I mean,
All
in
right.
some
Now
ways,
I'm depressed.
well, in some ways, it's also a call for simplicity, right? If you had a design system
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
place, if you had a unified,
Yep.
the problem is, right, is you have all these third parties that are developing something.
Yes.
You have one
Yes.
portal that's on one thing, and one portal goes somewhere else, and
That's
this
right.
other port, right? So it's all developed differently. It's in different places, different
Right.
databases, so in some ways, if you have a simpler website
Yeah.
that graphically does less, that from a feature set is targeted, maybe,
Yeah.
if you don't have the sprawl,
Right.
you limit the opportunities
You
for
maybe
things
have a
to,
chance.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe you have a chance. Yep.
But it's tough. It's tough. But lots of change. Obviously, the development culture is continuing
But
to
I
change
would
rapidly.
say, okay, so trying to be somewhat useful and hopeful and optimistic, which is not my usual personality,
Yeah.
I would say that if you can't fix the whole thing, which you probably can't, just try to fix something. Just look for those moments that matter. See if you could fix a couple of strings. Just try, anything you can do is better than not doing anything at all. There you go. That's as optimistic as I can get. It's
And
not very
even
optimistic.
some basic stuff, right? I mean, literally the traditional 404, right? It exists not it exists in a database somewhere. But if you run into an error where a
Yeah.
page cannot be displayed, right?
Yeah.
You Instead of it just being blank, you get a 404 error. Hey, this
Yeah.
page cannot be found. So at least the user
At
knows that the
least they
page
got that.
cannot be
Right.
found, right? So you
At
can
least
do
they
some
know
pretty
what happened. They know it's not because
there's yeah,
something's wrong with them or wrong with their screen.
right.
It's something that page did disappear somehow.
So when you're doing your development, when you're doing your design, hey, what are some use cases that we can build in that
Yes.
aren't really context dependent? So for example,
Right.
the best example is the phone number, right?
Right.
We can't use dashes, right? Don't put in any dashes. And so when you're building it, it's a little bit of extra work, but
Right.
but it's from a technical perspective. It's
Yep.
not, click the button to continue because it's not context dependent.
Well,
If
and
if the form has
yeah.
dashes, put this error to the
Yeah,
user.
you're right about design system, and that's probably the one of the best things you can do because
Yeah,
then you're being consistent on
right.
these form fields, and
And that means so that means instead of having to write a different error message for each
right,
form field, because each form field is different,
right,
you can have standardized forms,
forms,
standardized
right,
error messages,
yep,
standardized flows,
yep,
standardize this, and so it really cuts down the
right,
number
and
of
also by
errors.
doing that, you're preventing the error because you're giving the little description in the field. You're
Theoretically.
showing the example.
The problem is, of course, is that it limits functionality and it limits how fast you can do stuff. And you can't just tack a new feature on. You can't just tack a new, so there's pros and cons, and different organizations handle it differently. So, all right, that
All
was
right.
Errors. Good
That was
job.
errors. We did it.
We did it. We did it.
And we didn't have any other errors while we were doing it, just that first one at the
We'll
beginning.
see what happens when I post it live, because we
Guthrie, if
don't
people
have the
want to
raw.
reach us, how do they reach us?
You can email info@theteamw.com, or like I said, the socials. LinkedIn's a good place, but we'll have a Blue Sky up. We're sort of we'll get our Instagram really rocking as well. YouTube, people can
Okay.
find us.
All right. It was good talking to you.
Yeah,
Bye,
you as well.
everyone.
Bye.